I didn't ask to get made. I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some little monster.
Rocket, no one's calling you a monster.
He called me vermin. She called me rodent.
Oof, that little sniffle. Rocket is the secret protagonist of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, according to director James Gunn. And seeing a non-raccoon cry right here is the single most impactful moment of the film. Why? Because hidden in his monstrosity is his humanity and his heroism. Also, yeah, he's a I'm Erik Voss, and this is The Deep Dive. Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite MCU film, a movie I've broken down in the past, analyzing the music and seeking its long-lost hidden Easter egg, which earned me some kudos from the director. But my love for this film goes deeper than egg hunting. My wife and I love the Guardians soundtrack so much that it was our go-to playlist to get through COVID, and we featured both Ain't No Mountain High Enough and Come and Get Your Love at our wedding. We fooled around and fell in love to these tunes. And now with Guardians Volume 3, Gunn has doubled down on this entire trilogy actually being the story of Rocket. In this part 1 of the Deep Dive's Guardians rewatch series, I'm gonna illustrate exactly why. And even though I've covered this movie quite a bit, I seriously found dozens of new details I never spotted before. And our visual guide for this analysis will be Rocket's rap sheet, his real one, the counts that should go on the criminal record of this freak, so that we can get a full assessment of exactly who this secret protagonist is. And the best way to support the Deep Dive and to celebrate Rocket taking a spotlight is with one of our 89P13 inspired designs at nerdriot.shop. Okay, Volume 1 opens on Earth in 1988 with an opening shot of a close-up of a young Peter Quill's Walkman as he listens to his mixtape, Awesome Mix Volume 1, already foreshadowing that there will be a Volume 2 of it. And I never noticed before that Peter's thumb is actually cranking the volume up to try to block out the sounds of the hospital. His mother Meredith made this mixtape, so Peter is shielding himself from his mother's reality with the representation of her that Meredith wanted him to hear. Now, the soundtrack in this movie is always diegetic, which means that it's coming from an audio source from within the context of the scene, like the Walkman headphones, the stereo on the Milano, or even Peter singing himself. This opening song is 10cc's 1975 I'm Not in Love, which is about the fear of telling someone the words I love you since it might degrade the meaning, a reflection of Peter's fear here to tell his mother goodbye. Rocket similarly struggles to express explicit loving words and gestures, which is why Drax petting him in that final sequence comes as an initial shock, followed by an exhale of gratitude. And when Mantis tries to do this to Rocket in Volume 2, he bites her. James Gunn always takes the uncommon step of writing his song selections into the screenplay, and he would play these songs on set so that the actors could hear and react to them, and for that emotion to be visible on screen. And the Awesome Mix Volume 1 became the first ever movie soundtrack in history to reach #1 on the Billboard chart without any original song composed for the film. Simply Gunn's choice of pre-existing songs and their connection to the story carried this all the way to the top. And Gunn said that he chose the playlists of Volume 1 and Volume 2 from the point of view of Meredith Quill. Everything we hear is her message to her son. The summer camp shirt that Peter wears in this scene will later be worn by his hookup, Berit, and on the desk beside him is the Missouri state flag. Quill's origin is in Missouri, and this is James Gunn's home state, so there's always a lot of shout outs to it. Meredith Quill, dying of cancer, tells Peter he's like his father.
And he was an angel, composed out of pure light.
Yes, setting up Peter's father, Ego, a celestial who under his flesh, as it starts to get chipped away at, is a skeleton and nervous system made of light. And we learn in Volume 2 that it was his light that left Meredith with that brain tumor. But in this movie, Meredith's ongoing presence will be represented through light. Peter says he got a black eye from fighting with kids who killed a frog, but based on the way adult Peter kicks Orloni and uses them as microphones, he's either stopped giving a shit, or really he might have just been fighting with kids after telling them that his dad was a spaceman and they started making fun of his mom. And he didn't want to tell his mom that here.
And you would tell all the other children that he was your father, but that he was out of town.
Shooting Knight Rider or touring with his band in Germany.
Now, Meredith Quill is played by Laura Haddock, who also played the fangirl Steve Rogers met in the first Captain America film. Recently, She-Hulk brought up the mystery of which woman Steve lost his virginity to, and all signs point to this one girl that there was photographic evidence of. And from that, many have speculated that that fangirl might be Peter's grandmother, but James Gunn has in the past denied a connection between the two women. Peter gets abducted and screams. His instinct is to just call for his mother, but we can also read this as a kid who knows that his mom just got carried off by angels, hoping he's now getting taken to that same place. But you should know, according to literal descriptions of angels from the Bible, they're actually insanely terrifying, which gives a different meaning to Yondu's later line.
I may be as pretty as an angel, but I sure as hell ain't one.
Now, there's a really odd detail in the opening Marvel title card that I never heard before, a little camera shutter sound effect on the flash by the word studios. This sound is definitely not there for Winter Soldier, the movie that came out before this, or the Marvel movie that came after this, Avengers Age of Ultron. So what is this? Is this whole movie a snapshot of something? Something being seen behind a lens? I have an idea that relates this to Rocket. More on that in a bit. Onto the planet of Morag, 26 years later. Now these coordinates, M31V J00443799 plus 4129-236, are actual coordinates in the Andromeda Galaxy, which along with the coordinates for Xandar in this movie also begin with M31V, that's also known as Messier 31, M31. But the other 4 coordinates of this movie, for the Dark Aster, the Kiln, Thanos' Sanctuary, and Nowhere, are more or less confirmed to be part of the big Easter egg James Gunn has said remains not fully uncovered. Over the years, various people online, like our buddy MT, folks like Kyle Griffin, Alan Orsland, and others, have tirelessly attempted to decode them. The latest is that the Dark Aster coordinates translate to "this is mom's cancer," and the Kiln ones translate to "this isn't real," and that maybe the Nowhere one translates to Meredith Quill X, and the Thanos Sanctuary one could translate to Nexus of Alien Cancer. All this being a clue in 2014 for the big twist in the 2017 movie that Meredith's Quill cancer did not occur naturally but was given to her by her ex, Ego. Similar translations of the coordinates in Volume 2 have given us Half-World Cage C, Wyndham Built Earth, Biomedical Clinic 89P13, all of which seem to set up Volume 3, Herbert Wyndham's role in engineering Rocket, Subject 89P13, and building Counter-Earth in that movie. Gunn has paused responding to queries until after Volume 3 comes out, but in the past when he was presented some of these decodings, like in my 2020 analysis that all of Guardians is a diegetic musical love letter from Meredith Quill in the form of these mixtapes, Gunn has said things like "haha, nice work," and that 70% of the Easter egg has now been uncovered. And now that we just heard this opening title card Shudder sound effect, plus "this isn't real," they have my mind buzzing with theories of simulated realities and artificial worlds by Herbert Wyndham, like maybe he groomed Rocket in an ersatz Truman Show community. I guess we'll find out when Volume 3 comes out. But whatever the exact translation of these coordinates, it is clear that Peter's connection with his mother is important. Gunn has confirmed that the first movie is about the mother, the second movie is about the father, and that the third movie will be about the self. So we meet adult Peter Quill, played by Chris Pratt, who is cast deliberately for his smug, dickish energy, but his wide-eyed sincerity. The character was conceived as a heavy metal magazine-style womanizer, and he came back in the spotlight in the 2006 Annihilation storyline, which led to the 2008 reboot of the Guardians of the Galaxy comics by Abnett and Lanning that gave us the lineup that we know today. Before, the Guardians of 1969 was a more obscure lineup that actually included Yondu, but this 2008 reboot was closer to what we know in the films. When this movie was officially confirmed at Comic-Con 2012, the first visuals were concept art from Charlie Wynn that singled out Rocket in particular, showing his cybernetic arm, meaning that Rocket and his brokenness were at the heart of the Guardians films since their conception. In this scene, Peter uses a scanner to show what Morag used to look like, including a cameo of James Gunn's old dog, Dr. Wesley Von Spears, R.I.P. The planet's rain and puddles and geysers are the result of that planet normally being covered in oceans, which only recede once every 300 years, making this a rare window of opportunity. Peter listens to Redbone's "Come and Get Your Love" as Meredith has set him on a path to find love in this movie. And I only caught now how the rain clouds clear to form a beam of sunlight directly on Peter. As a boy, he feared lights like this from the sky, but now he can't get enough of the spotlight as his mom lights a path for him to find love. It's also worth noting that Redbone's "Come and Get Your Love" is the final track listed on the Volume 3 soundtrack, so this trilogy will likely close as it began. Peter bats a skeleton of a Corbinite. This is the horse-like faced race of Beta Ray Bill, and according to the screenplay, the warriors that the 2014 Gamora and Nebula were fighting in Avengers Endgame. Peter hops up the steps to the temple, kind of like Indiana Jones, carefully stepping over the booby trap stones in Raiders, a movie that Peter has seen since he references it later.
So this orb has a real shiny blue suitcase, Ark of the Covenant, Maltese Falcon sort of vibe.
So even the film homages in this movie are kind of diegetic in a way. Peter is aping what he just saw heroes do in 80s movies. Inside the temple is some stone artwork depicting 4 figures reaching toward these 6 Infinity Stones. Those 4 figures being Death, Entropy, Infinity, and Eternity. This according to the Guardians of the Galaxy art book. This mural shows up behind Peter during Tavan's monologue on Nowhere later, so people who housed the orb here knew that it contained an Infinity Stone. Of course, we would meet Eternity in Thor: Love and Thunder. Peter shoots at Korath with his element guns, or his quad blasters. The Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special revealed that these were given to him by Yondu as a Christmas present. Peter tumbles around the Milano when he gets hit by a geyser, and his troll doll falls right past camera, which he'll later use to troll Yondu. We see that Peter has later placed his doll right by his tape deck, which also has stickers and a trading card for Alf. The I Am Groot episode Magnum Opus revealed that inside Peter's backpack when he got abducted was an Alf comic, number 4, published by Marvel in June 1988, which would be right around when Peter got abducted. And to the left, there's also a ticket stub for a Philadelphia Eagles versus St. Louis Cardinals game that I don't think anyone spotted before. It's a fun Easter egg because before they were the Arizona Cardinals, the football team was the St. Louis Cardinals from 1960 to 1987, when a young Peter Quill could have seen them. The music here is Go All the Way by Raspberries, a song about a woman encouraging a guy to nut up and go all the way, which is ironic because right in front of Beeree, Peter is actively swiping through photos of other women. Yondu chews out Peter, but he tells the other Ravagers to back off.
Now don't you worry about Mr. Quill.
Now, the original creator Steve Englehart said that he named the character Peter Quill because both Peter and Quill are references to a dick, which the character is. So with Yondu's arrow angled suggestively from down below, it seems like Yondu's making a similar reference. There are just a few suggestive dick jokes throughout this movie, some subtle, some not so subtle. We meet Ronan the Accuser.
You will never rule Xandar.
No. I will cure it!
Part of what makes this film work so well is that all the actors are playing things fully sincere. Lee Pace as Ronan, Michael Rooker as Yondu, Benicio del Toro as the Collector, Josh Brolin as Thanos. They sell every line. Sometimes in the MCU it can feel like both characters and the actors are a little embarrassed to be there, but none of the characters in Guardians are that self-aware. I like to think they all have Drax syndrome, sincere to a fault, devoid of irony, and no metaphors go over their head. Their reflexes are too fast, they would catch it. Ronan's flagship, the Dark Aster, is a 3-mile wide, 9,509-year-old ship. So in his religious zealotry, he's essentially commandeered Noah's Ark and uses it to commit blood rituals and subvert the modern Kree political interests. Guardians does more MCU world building in 2 hours than any other MCU film combined. In fact, most other MCU films that come after this cash in on and double dip on what this movie creates. The look and the design of the Celestials, the history of the Infinity Stones, things like universal translators, the political drama of the Kree, all of it is here in this movie. So we arrive on Xandar with Rocket's commentary on humanoid creatures.
All of them in a big hurry to get from something stupid to nothing at all. Pathetic. What is this thing? Look how it thinks it's so cool. It's not cool to get help. Walk by yourself, you little gargoyle.
Yeah, his camera scope shutter sounds could connect to that mystery sound in the title card. Like maybe this entire movie is Rocket's bitter perspective on the freakishness of the rest of the world. Like you can imagine James Gunn seeing himself as a bit of a monster, viewing the world through a lens to point out their monstrosity. Rocket had to learn to walk on 2 feet by himself, and here he says it's not cool to get help, which is really the antithesis of his journey in this film, to find strength in numbers. Guardians root myth, freaks learn to dance together. Stan Lee cameos here with blue scroll text beside him, according to Gunn, translating to Excelsior, Stan's catchphrase and New York State motto, meaning ever upward. Peter and Gamora scramble for the orb while Rocket and Groot try to capture her.
Not her handle. Learn genders, man.
Yes, Groot does not distinguish between genders because Flora Colossi reproduce asexually. Also, he's very open-minded. Peter gets rid of Gamora by sticking his jet thrusters to send her flying, like how he used his thrusters to blast out of the temple on Morag. The Nova Corps arrests them.
Subject 89P13, drop your weapon.
Oh, crap.
89P13 is also in yellow on his cockpit screen, on Rocket's booking screen, and the number that Volume 3 will reveal was tattooed on Rocket by his maker, Herbert Wyndham. Roman Day says,
"Hey, it isn't Star Prince."
Like Korath, no one can get Peter's nickname right, and they even mislabel it on the booking screen as Space Lord. This whole section of the movie is a nod to The Usual Suspects, another Benicio del Toro film in which a group of criminals end up joining forces just because the cops made the mistake of incarcerating them together. Gamora's screen lists her as the last survivor of the Zehoberei people, a backstory that we see in Infinity War, but Thanos only killed 50% of them, so I guess the rest of them still didn't make it. And then of course, Rocket, 89P13, his origin here is listed as Half-World, as is the case in the comics, but in Volume 3 it looks like they're making the planet Counter-Earth with elements of Half-World mixed in with it. Lila is listed among his associates. That's his girlfriend, otter-like creature, who we'll meet in Volume 3. Really though, the most indicting thing is his height. The camera refuses to crane down, so that Rocket just sticks up from the bottom awkwardly, which makes him a perfect pairing with the inverse, Groot, who's too tall to fit in the frame in the next shot. His species is Flora Colossus, and I like how they were only able to scan his fingerprints because his arms have now started to grow back. Interesting how one of his associates is listed as Tibius Lark, a name unknown to comics that Gunn has said will factor into his backstory, but it hasn't yet. Peter Jason Quill, the name Jason because in the comics, Peter's father was Jason, J''S-O-N. But really cool detail here, while the others had normal DNA scans highlighted in blue, Peter's flashes red, a hint that they are unable to process it because his DNA is half celestial.
When we arrested you, we noticed an anomaly in your nervous system, so we had it checked out.
His rap sheet also includes 1 count of illegal manipulation of a Gromosian duchess. Gromosians are an alien race from the Thor comics, and we see how he has a universal translator implanted in his neck, establishing why he can understand all these other alien languages, though not yet Groot, because it's not really a language, it's just vocal utterances that the more time you spend with Groot, you start to understand the variances of. They are brought to the Kiln prison facility, where the guard listens to Peter's mixtape, Blue Sweets, Hooked on a Feeling, which I now find interesting to see playing over Peter getting to know Rocket, seeing his implant scars, where the fur still hasn't grown back around the scars. So maybe Peter is seeing Rocket's scars, and for the first time taking him seriously as a real being that he can relate with, and a freak that he might be able to dance with. Now, all the prisoners wear yellow jumpsuits with barcodes on the legs to indicate their crimes. Color-coded, black for murder, red for arson, and the thickness of the bar indicates the seriousness of the crime. Notice how Gamora's is all black because she just killed a ton of people. The old man who yells at Peter is a cameo by Lloyd Kaufman, the co-founder of Troma Studios and James Gunn's mentor. At the table, a woman cries while watching a hollow projection of her waving family, and as Groot passes, he takes note of this. Of all of them, Groot has the greatest empathy. This blue alien prisoner is a cameo by Nathan Fillion.
I'm gonna slather you up in Gunavian jelly. Go to town.
Gunavian refers to the Guna, a servant race to the Skrull in Marvel Comics, and the prisoner who runs his thumb over his throat to Gamora is a later one who tells Drax, completely out of fear, that he doesn't know what that means.
You've seen this, right? You know what that is.
Yeah.
Everyone knows.
No.
And another example of good shot composition, our first shot of Drax is revealed with the character in the spotlight, as if DJ Meredith is selecting the last freak to join the dance floor. Later, when Groot sleeps, I like how his roots snake up against the wall to keep him sitting upright. No joke, every shot in this movie has something fun going on. Peter tries to explain to Drax what running one's finger over their throat means, and a little continuity detail, the back of Peter's hand remains cut from where Nebula threw the dagger at his hand to drop the orb on Xandar. Ronan meets with Thanos, Josh Brolin's first appearance in the MCU, which James Gunn said was one of the trickier things for him to write, because Kevin Feige wanted him to establish the Infinity Saga big bad, but Gunn didn't want to undercut this movie's villain either, so he kind of splits the difference by having Ronan brutally kill the other that was Thanos' advocate from the 2012 Avengers film. Thanos' screen time in this movie is very limited, but it's effective.
Return to me again empty-handed, and I will bathe the starways in your blood.
Yeah, we cut away from Thanos quite a bit, probably to save VFX budget, fewer frames to render, but we stay on Brolin for the vivid verb choice of bathe. And then we cut back to Lee Pace's face for the subtle tremble. And notice how the backdrop of the scene is literal blood red space. And since Ronan is a guy who seems to sleep in the blood of his enemies, it shakes him to think that anyone will bathe in his blood. Rocket tells them what he needs to escape, a security band, and...
That dude there, I need his prosthetic leg.
His leg?
Yeah.
Bradley Cooper does a subtle thing when he says leg, where he's clearly holding back laughter.
I need his prosthetic leg.
This sets up how he really just sent Peter after the leg as a joke.
Oh, I was just kidding about the leg. I just need these 2 things.
Rocket actually calls us back later.
There's one more thing we need to complete the plan. That guy's eye.
No, we don't need that guy's eye.
No, seriously, I need it. It's important to me.
This time, Rocket's not as good at hiding the laugh. So Rocket collecting people's prosthetics, which later will include him wanting and receiving Bucky's arm. I think his plugins from the High Evolutionary have left him with an endless appreciation and fixation on broken parts and how they can be best used. But this is also a valuable trait, because Rocket turning this guard booth into a gravity bubble steered by the security drones, repurposing the instruments of their destruction into those of their freedom, is the coolest thing anyone in this movie has done so far. And it's totally clear why Gunn sees Rocket as a secret protagonist. Rocket quickly crafted a practical solution from broken parts that were right in front of all of them. But Peter has to go back for his Walkman, which is way more valuable to him than the orb, and the intake guy is listening to Rupert Holmes' The Escape, the Pina Colada song, which is a story about a couple cheating on each other with, well, it turns out each other. As much as you try to run away from love, you always end up right back to where you need to be. Bringing us to the dirtiest joke of the MCU.
If I had a black light, the place would look like a Jackson Pollock painting.
And I think the grossest part of this that I just realized, earlier Gamora's booking screen listed ocular implants, so she might actually be able to see in ultraviolet frequencies. David Bowie's Moon Age Daydream plays on the stereo as they approach Nowhere, which might be the source of them calling their 3rd generation ship The Bowie in Volume 3 as they take over this setting as their home. Nowhere is the severed head of a Celestial, and we've since met several Celestials in the MCU. Ego, the ones in Eternals, and a few in the background of Thor Love and Thunder, so Nowhere having been decapitated tells us that there was once a vicious conflict among the the Celestials. As we soar in, the camera focuses on the Tavon Corporation mining craft the same way that we focused on the security drones when we first entered the kiln. Gunn always teases the exit strategy whenever we enter a new place, and these mining craft will be how the Guardians get out. Groot grows a flower for a little girl, an homage to 1931's Frankenstein when a girl gives the monster a flower and he throws her in a lake. Now, I've never mentioned this before, but the name of the bar is Boot of Jemiah, after the Celestial Jemiah the Analyzer, the green one that we actually saw in Eternals. This could be a nod to Nowhere's history, that it might have been Jemiah who kicked his head off. Inside, they bet on Orloni fighting this other creature. James Gunn recently confirmed that this other creature is a hairless Thasaki, and that is the same species as the furry creature Blurp in Volume 3. Peter tells Gamora about Footloose,
a great hero named Kevin Bacon. He teaches an entire city full of people with sticks up their butts that dancing is the greatest thing there is.
Drax and Mantis, of course, will get Peter the gift of Kevin Bacon as a Christmas present in the holiday special, and this here shows that Peter inherited the magic of dance from his mother. His mission is to get these freaks to dance with him, as he starts to do here with Gamora and Elvis Bishop's fooled around and fell in love. With the mining sparks romantically raining down from above, Gamora nearly gives in, but draws her dagger.
No!
What the hell?
I know who you are, Peter Quill, and I am not some starry-eyed waif here to succumb to your pelvic sorcery.
Pelvic sorcery is really Peter Quill's greatest weapon, gyrating those hips in his dance battle to save the universe. Which brings us back to our opening clip.
I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some little monster.
Rocket, no one's calling you a monster.
He called me vermin. She called me rodent.
It's interesting how Rocket didn't take offense to being called a raccoon at first because he didn't know what a raccoon was. But vermin and rodent are pejorative terms that remind him that he was a cruel lab experiment by the High Evolutionary. It's fitting that James Gunn would go on to name his first era of the DC universe Gods and Monsters, because that's really the story of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Again and again, it's a story of how freakish monsters triumph over those seeking to be gods, or are actually gods themselves. In the Collector's Vault is a Chitauri, Cosmo the telekinetic space dog, who plays a much bigger role in the Guardians holiday special and in Volume 3. Howard the Duck is actually visible early on in this scene. There's a dark elf from Thor the Dark World, and the slugs from James Gunn's horror film Slither. Tannelier Tavon the Collector provides the MCU with a real history of the Infinity Stones, how the Power Stone was once wielded by the celestial Aeson the Searcher and attempted to be held by this interesting group of 8 individuals, which foreshadows the joining of hands of the Guardians in the final battle. Now, there were 8 then, and they were destroyed. Half as many now, only 4 joining hands, but they're able to live, which just gives a sense of how exactly Peter's celestial DNA is. But in this scene, I love how Del Toro sells this.
Beautiful, beyond compare.
I never noticed this, but Rocket impersonates the gesture.
We're all very fascinated, Whitey.
And I love it because they had to animate Rocket doing this based on Del Toro's initial performance on set. I'm guessing Sean Gunn probably did it because he stood in for Rocket on set and just mimicked the move. And as Karina grabs the Power Stone, notice the former servant behind her.
I will no longer be your slave!
Yeah, the past one is trying to warn her, pounding on the glass, knowing that touching the Power Stone will kill many of them. As the vault explodes, I've said before that you can kind of make out shapes of the emblems of the 6 Avengers in this wide shot. The only one that actually buy now is the large Mjolnir shape tilted over the entrance. I think the others might be reaches. Now, the mining pods are industrial grade and destructible because they have to drill into celestial bone. That's why they're able to bumper car them into each other. And as Peter claws into the necrocrafts so that he can have weapons, I gotta say, this is just really well constructed action. A ship within a ship. Peter's able to convince Yondu to team up with them against Ronan, and Rocket, Drax, and Groot rejoin them, and they start to put the plan together.
I have part of a plan.
What percentage?
I don't know, 12%.
In the past, when asked why 12% and if it had any connection to Tony allowing Pepper to have, quote, 12% of the credit for Stark Tower in the 2012 Avengers film, James Gunn has said that the number 12 is the highest single-syllable number, which just helps with pacing a joke. I just love this idea that there could be a kind of scientific code to comedy writing, and it just makes me feel that there's some truth to Gunn's coordinates code, because this guy is clearly into numbers and numerology. And Peter gives his big speech.
I look around at us. You know what I see? Losers. I mean, like, folks who have lost stuff.
Yes, he redefines being a loser as one who has experienced loss, a new kind of power to being broken, freaks learning how to dance together. Now, when Rocket stands up, he tugs his clothes, which James Gunn confirmed was a nod to the famous Captain Picard tuck meme. Whenever he stands up, he always pulls his shirt down. And it was Sean Gunn who ad-libbed this.
We're all standing up now. Bunch of jackasses standing in a circle.
But Rocket is likening their fates with the dope standing in a circle who were destroyed by the Power Stone. But this stronger dance crew of freaks will be able to replicate it to more success. Next, Peter listens to the Runaways' Cherry Bomb, and we get a slow montage of everyone walking toward camera, something James Gunn does in all of his movies, it seems like, including the Suicide Squad. I love how Rocket tugs at his crotch. We see how Yondu has added that jewel frog that he took from the broker on Xandar to his collection of his doohickeys, which sets up why him getting trolled is actually a silver lining for him. So on to the final aerial battle against Ronan's forces. After exposing the Dark Aster's shield, the Ravager ships dip under and come up below the warship, and we get a shot of the 3 Sons of Xandar in frame. It's also the closing image of the movie, but in this case it's only for a few frames, and I just love the continuity of reminding us that this is not exactly Earth. After his ship crashes, Yondu's Yaka arrow takes out a dozen or so guys in a single whistle, but beyond these strikes, I think my favorite part of it is the timing of everyone collapsing at the same time, including the Necrocraft. The action is actually structured the same way when Groot skewers all the Sakaran soldiers, bats them around the walls, killing a score of them with a single attack. The move is so savage, but what sells it is Groot turning around to smile at us. So we get death, 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 a pause, and then a grace note. Gamora and Nebula fight, with Nebula going over the edge, Nebula severing her own hand instead of joining her sister, but I like how her fingers continue to twitch on that severed hand. Groot sacrifices his body to form a protective shell around them, and I like how he releases these glowing spores. Even though they don't need that for their protection, he only does this so that they can all look into each other's eyes in these final moments, as he says,
"We are Groot."
It's a very similar maneuver that Rocket did with them on the kiln, creating a protective bubble around themselves so that they can get out alive. Rocket in that moment knew that they would need to stay together, and Groot demonstrates it now with the ultimate sacrifice. In the wreckage, the 5 stair steps Ooh Ooh Child plays from the still intact tape deck. It's seriously a miracle, a song about a parent comforting a child, and this mixtape surviving impossible odds just to inspire a son at this crucial moment as Peter sings literally this song from his mom's playlist playing on the tape deck.
What are you doing?
Dance off, bro. Me and you.
We are now seeing the dancer teaching the rest of the world to dance, which ends up inspiring even the next generation of Groot. Dancing, by the way, that James Gunn himself did the motion capture for. In the dance battle, Peter reaches out to Gamora, but she denies him, which sets up the beautiful moment after he grabs the Power Stone, where she finally reaches back out to him to take her hand. And who does Peter see when he looks back at Gamora? He sees his mother, Meredith, giving him another chance to say goodbye to her, but hello to a new family. As they all join hands, the freaks have learned to dance together. I used to think that Guardians was about found family versus a family you were born into, but I actually think now that we can have both. For James Gunn, Rocket is both a VFX animation voiced by Bradley Cooper, a scamp that he found to represent his own monstrous tendencies, but also a character brought to life on set by his own brother, the family he was born into. Because family ultimately is defined by the ones who risk it all to grab hold of us when we are at our most vulnerable, when it is scariest to do so, just to ease the pain we feel by a little bit. After what James Gunn went through in 2018, and the way that this group of people stood by him, is this not what they did for him? But I think the fact that Rocket is the last to join the embrace isn't an indictment on his character, but rather a telling affirmation of his importance. It wasn't until 89P13 joined this chain that it all synced together, and Peter could then, only then, gain control over the Power Stone. So later, when Nova Prime tells Peter that his father is something ancient, every time we see Peter's hologram being projected, his arm is extended in a way that looks like he is pleasuring himself. It's about to be Jackson Pollock all over this place too, but since Peter Quill is only the surface protagonist of this movie, the better dick joke, in my opinion, goes to the secret protagonist. Rocket has replanted Groot, and baby Groot stiffens right between Rocket's legs. I mean, come on. Him tugging at his crotch and the cherry bomb walk says it all. Our man is packing. I think that's why Peter was so uncomfortable when he saw him naked on the kiln. And to be clear here, Groot is not reborn or cloned. He is technically Groot's son, which is why throughout this Groot's life, he has a different anatomy. So Peter reads Meredith's letter, and we learn that he got the name Star-Lord from her. As the son of a Celestial, he is the Lord of a Star. And he finally opens her final gift. Why now? Because by envisioning Meredith when he reached out for Gamora's hand, he finally feels like he understands his mother's message to him, and he finds closure in that. So he can finally let her go by opening this final gift. Now, it's interesting that the first song of the Awesome Mix Volume 2 is technically Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's Ain't No Mountain High Enough. The last song we heard of the Volume 1 mixtape was Ooh Ooh Child. So one mixtape ending with her consoling and comforting Peter, the next one beginning with Peter's journey ahead. The final track of this movie is the Jackson 5's I Want You Back. It's a true classic and a jammer, and despite despite its wholesome Motown vibes, the Jackson 5 performed this while under alleged abuse by their father. So a dark reading of this would suggest that Peter is thinking, I want you back, as he's really blasting off in search of a horribly violent father that will just torture him. And the same could be said for our secret protagonist, Rocket, a creature with only anger in his heart toward his creator, Herbert Wyndham, but is destined to face that creator once again in Volume 3. Perhaps the cruelest joke comes during the credits. No, not Groot pranking Drax with the dance scene, or Seth Green voicing Howard the Duck in the post-credit scene. It's this little detail. No raccoons or tree creatures were harmed during the making of this film, which isn't really fair because Groot and Rocket, you could say, are the most hurt by the events of this film. It's not really fair to call Groot a tree creature, he's a Flora Colossus, and Rocket isn't a raccoon. So while those things weren't hurt, these two Guardians definitely were hurt. Now yes, it was brave of Peter Quill to grab the Power Stone, but really it was his celestial privilege that saved him. Rocket has no such privilege. His complete rap sheet aren't crimes or weaknesses that he should be ashamed of, but really heroic attributes that make the perfect recipe for the hero this movie needed to keep all the action moving forward. Really James Gunn's surrogate in the film. Rocket led the escape from the kiln, he was prepared to save Peter from the Ravagers, he blasted a hole in the Dark Aster for the others to get in there, he saved the civilians of Xandar by shooting down Necrocraft over water, he saved Roman Day's wife and daughter, which scored the Guardians back their restored ship, he kamikazes the Dark Aster to bring it down, he rebuilds that Hadron Enforcer in a matter of seconds to break the Cosmirod Warhammer and free the Power Stone, and he completes the Power Stone dance line. And in the end, it's Rocket who gathers and replants Groot's pieces so that we can still have Groot on this team. I wouldn't say Rocket is the secret protagonist, he's the obvious protagonist. He's by far the most consequential freak on this team, and we will see how our secret protagonist continues driving everything in Volume 2. That deep dive is coming next week. Hey, you can support this channel and celebrate Rocket's redemption with one of our 89P13 inspired designs at nerdriot.shop. Subscribe to the deep dive, turn notifications on, and share this channel and its videos with everyone you know. Follow me at EA Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, my divers of the deep.